Hi there, it's Tuck. I'm back again to talk with you more about attachment in society. We're in week one of 6 weeks of talking about laying out the problem. So this week we're looking at the scope of the problem. On Monday we did Words Mean Things Monday. We defined our terms and we talked about the definition of attachment as a learned style of being emotionally intimate. And today we're going to move on to Use Your Words Tuesday, and we're going to look at developing a model for understanding attachment. And I just want to say here, I recently had a young friend mention to me a quote that somebody had told him, which reminded me that my dad used to say this to me when I was younger. And he said, all models are wrong, but some models are useful, which essentially is an acknowledgement that the models we come up with in our human limitation are limited, but that doesn't make them invalid, and they can be useful for us to understand even things that are larger and extend beyond the limitations of the model. So with that in mind, that's kind of how I've approached the building of models for understanding attachment and the various other practices that I use in my own healing work. So without further ado, let's go on to Use Your Words Tuesday. I'm going to explain too where I am. I'm sitting here at the foot of my driveway, a little bit up in my driveway actually, on my property at my house. So I have some woods, and I'm sitting here in the woods. People are coming home from work, so I think you can hear the cars, but I'm trying to use the last of my good light tonight so I can get this video out earlier tomorrow morning than I was able to today. So you might hear cars. I can hear a buggy clapping by too, an Amish buggy, which we also have in our neighborhood. So if we begin to look at the 4 relationship foundations on which an attachment pattern is based, we can think of them in basically 4 different categories. The way we relate to ourselves, the way we relate to God, the way we relate to other people, and the way we relate to the world at large. Not necessarily people in the world, but the world and its resources, the landscape of the world. And it might seem a little strange to categorize it that way, but there are reasons for building the model this way. And I just want to say, one of the fundamental realities of an attachment pattern is that it revolves around the idea of chaos and order. Right? So in thinking about it that way, our relationship to ourselves is really about what our own inner balance is of chaos and order. And our relationship with God is about chaos and order in the realm that lies beyond our immediate perception and experience. And our relationship with others is about the ways that chaos and order intervene in our connecting with other people. And that our relationship to the world is really about the ways that chaos and order reign in the world outside of us and our immediate family. And this is the piece, the outer world, is the part where I really think that this learning about attachment touches on so much of what we're experiencing in the 21st century. We're almost 20 years in, and it's really clear to me that we're having a lot of chaos. Chaos is predominating over order at the moment, and we're really reaching for order in some ways that are not very helpful. So I'm hoping that by beginning to lay this foundation, we can start to really think about and consider what our own experiences have been in these categories and how that may have formed our outlook and our way of relating in all of these ways. So I just want to go through them kind of quickly and talk about the content of each one of them. So if we start with the self, because this is our first relationship, really. When we're very tiny in the womb, that's all we're aware of. Whatever our awareness is of mom, we don't have a sense that it's separate from us, right? We're part of that. That's our world and we're part of it. There isn't an awareness of boundary there. There isn't even for tiny babies once they're outside the womb. It takes about a year for them to really become aware of the separation between them and mom. So if we think about our relationship to ourself, which sounds a little bit crazy, but it's not a disordered way to think about it. It really is the way we develop. In the work that I do, I look at the human being through 4 different channels, kind of a physical channel of the body, a spiritual channel, a heart-based channel of the emotions, and a mental or cognitive channel. So if we think about how are we relating to ourselves from our very earliest moments of having been created, right, having been conceived, in our body we become aware of sensation, and the intensity or the ebbing away of sensation. In our spirit, there's a sense that we're at a threshold, right? We're at the very beginning of life. That sense of threshold is very strong at other points in our life as well, right near death and at other points in the middle. And in our emotionality, there's a sense of stability or lability, it's called clinically, or instability, changeability in our emotionality. And that becomes clear in infants, given whatever their temperament is, right? Parents will say, oh, this child has this kind of temperament, this child is really different just from the day that she was born, or right when he popped out, he was a completely different kid. And then as we go on developing, the people around us that are taking care of us can observe our cognition. They can watch us think. You can watch a baby's face as the wheels are turning, right? You can kind of see. So the balance of order and chaos there is about knowing, having a sense of whether we're in clarity or we're in confusion. And that goes on throughout our life, but it begins very early. Typically in colloquial conversation about this, I move from self to others, because at an outward level, that's what it looks like we're doing. But because of the proximity of tiny children to the threshold of existence, the beginning of their existence, I want to go over and look at our relationship to God. Because I think from our very earliest moments, we are relating to God whether we understand how to talk about that or not. And so a few ways we might talk about it, especially the way that happens very early, is in terms of we are giving form to something transcendent. We have to be able to comprehend that or experience it. So there's something, it's an incarnation in a way, right, that's happening for us. And we're also building a construct around what's holy or transcendent and what's earthly or immanent, present with us here. And the relationship of those 2 realms to each other needs to have a construct to hold it. And our experiences have that sheen on them from our very earliest moments. We also, later on, as we get more cognitive, are making assumptions and decisions at a subconscious level, and then eventually at a conscious level as we're learning in a more academic way about authority and sovereignty. Because God represents, for many people, authority, and for others, just simply sovereignty, for those that acknowledge sovereignty of God. So there are a lot of ways that we're bringing order out of chaos as we relate to God. When it comes to other people and our connections bringing us order out of chaos, during the primary attachment window of, say, the time in the womb through birth and up to age 2, and then extended a little bit before we go to school, we're still at home with our family. The others in our life are just our family for the most part. Maybe some extended family, maybe some folks in a church environment if we're very close to them, or in our neighborhood if we have really close relationships there. But the people that are primarily going to form our attachment pattern in relationship with us are going to be our family members, our immediate family. And within that, our primary caregivers, right? Assuming that we have 1 or 2 parents at home that's taking care of us, then our siblings are very secondary in terms of interaction for our primary attachment pattern. Because if we have capable, functional, willing parents, then our siblings are not providing primary care. Even if they're older and helping out, mom and dad are still the people that we're going to primarily. So when babies are first born, certainly in the womb, and even when they're first born, absolutely for that first year, their nervous system is not baked. It's not done. There's still their ability to move between different aspects of their nervous system is a very bumpy ride. And they need to hitch a ride, primarily with mom, which is the physical space they were baked in, right? But also with dad, in a secondary way, so that they can learn between having their foot on the gas with the sympathetic nervous system or putting their foot on the brakes with the parasympathetic nervous system. So they have to go and then stop and slow down. And that's how we are balanced, and it's how our system is soothed and stays healthy. But we can't do that if our parents have a very chaotic pattern of driving through this gas and brakes pattern. It becomes much more difficult if we don't have parents, or if we only have one, or if our parents are in and out a lot. It changes the pattern. Or if we have parents that are physically present, but they're not willing. They're just not participating in our life. It's also more difficult if we have parents who would like to do this, but they're just not very skilled. So all of those things can provide some impediment or a slowdown or a little hitch in our ability to smooth out the pattern of our nervous system. And none of those are deal breakers. You know, they don't mean that we end up, you know, serial killers. All of us have some gaps in this, and we function okay, just fine. But these are the categories that affect the quality of our attachment. In the outer world, I divide our capacity between two different things. Will I be able to get my basic needs met? And can I get my basic needs met? And the division for me between those two is that will I get them met has everything to do with the dynamics in my family. Is that going to happen for me in the world? But that's when a family is in a larger container, a larger context in which it's possible to meet needs, right? Can I get my needs met has more to do with community realities. There's a very big difference between a chaotic family where people aren't functioning well, or they're harming one another, or they're not able to stay on top of food and clothes and sleep and basic needs, but they're in a community where those things would be accessible if they were functioning better. And then a circumstance where you've had 3 generations of open warfare, right? In a society that's completely a war-torn, failed state, there's a very different kind of attachment impact. Partly because it's society-wide, so there's no such thing as secondary caregiving, or secondary caregiving doesn't look the same as it would here, because the resources are just so dispersed and so thin that the availability is not really there. So when we relate to the outer world, I think looking at how outer is it, right? Does it just extend as far as our family, or has there been a long-term crisis in our community, or is our entire society of the country we're living in been completely devastated? And has it been that way for many, many years or decades, generations of people? So those are all the factors that go into baking the attachment pie. And I don't want to leave you with the impression that anything that isn't perfect is a complete disaster. That's not true. We're very resilient, and we're going to talk later about a concept called good enough, right? What's good enough for us to function well. And most of us are functioning pretty well at the moment, all things considered. But this just gives you a starting point to be able to think about some of the places that we have come from, which will help us shed some light on where we're going. So feel free to comment and communicate with me, either here. You can find me at YouTube or on Minds, or also on Parler. So I would really love to engage with you and have these conversations. Thanks very much. I will see you tomorrow. Bye.